Being able to eat safe, healthy food is something we take for granted as Canadians. But national surveys show that about 3 million Canadians live in homes where there is not enough food to maintain a healthy diet. That's 10% of the country, and the situation is getting worse. We know that many other people, those who are not counted in these national surveys, also face food insecurity. These include homeless people, those living in remote, isolated areas, and Aboriginal people living on reserve. Children are often hit hardest when it comes to a lack of healthy food. Nearly 40% of food bank users are children. This means more than 325,000 Canadian children rely on donated food for their meals. Hunger is a short-term effect of food insecurity. Lack of healthy food can also have long-term effects on children and their futures. Research shows that children who don't get enough food or enough nutritious food have lower scores in math, reading, and vocabulary tests. What will this mean for the future of these children and for the health of the Canadian population in the future? Hungry children are members of families who can't afford or can't get enough healthy food. Food insecurity means that women in lone parent families often deprive themselves of food to feed their children. They often feel stressed, inadequate, and ashamed that they cannot feed their children properly. Canadians take for granted that food will always be available, but the farmers producing food in Canada face problems too. For example, locally grown produce travels 90 kilometers from the farm to the point of sale. In contrast, most of the produce sold in supermarkets travels an average of 2,405 kilometers. That's nearly 27 times further to reach the same point of sale. The further the food must travel to reach its destination, the more we must rely on transportation to receive it. And more transportation means greater cost to the consumer and to the environment. The obvious solution to this problem is to buy food from local sources. But because the economic climate does not support small farmers producing for a nearby market, these local sources are becoming increasingly difficult to find. Farm families may face their own food security issues. Farm families have lower family incomes than the average Canadian family. More than 35% of Canadian farmers are over the age of 55, while only 12% are under the age of 35. There are now fewer but bigger farms within Canada. Big farms tend to use farming practices, such as more extensive use of pesticides, that may be more harmful to the environment. Canadians should be concerned about our food, about where it comes from, and who can afford it. In other words, Canadians should be concerned about food security and the policies that influence it. The key to addressing food insecurity is policy change that will address its causes. But first, we must answer the question, what is food security? Section 1. What are we talking about?
When I think about food security, I think in terms of like the food being from a healthy source, no pesticides on it, preferably grown locally, definitely not food genetically modified.
Food security to me means to be able to go and buy the foods that I want or I need to keep my family healthy without having to go and take it out of something else like my bill money or something.
For me, food security is making sure that my family in my home have different foods from the land, the fish, the meat, the berries, the roots.
Food security is a positive way of speaking about access to food for good health, and access to food for strong communities.
Food security to me means that the 6 billion plus people living on this earth all have enough food to live a reasonably comfortable life.
Food security to me means that people have access to food always. And by meaning access, they can have food and it's safe, it's good for them to eat, it's nutritious, and it's always there for them.
Food security includes the circle of planting, growing, harvesting, processing, transporting, marketing, shopping, preparing, and eating food, as well as preserving our environment. Most people agree that a food-secure community is a place where everyone can get nutritious and safe food that they enjoy eating, either because they can afford to buy it, or because they can grow it, raise it, or access it in another way. In a food-secure community, food is grown and processed in ways that are environmentally sound and socially just. People in food-secure communities are able to get culturally acceptable and appropriate foods in a way that maintains human dignity. Part of food security is sharing food with others and celebrating culture and community with food. When you are food secure, you feel confident about the quality of the food you are eating and know that you will have enough. So now that we know what a food-secure community looks like, why should Canadians care about the issue of food security? Section 2. Why care about food security? Perhaps the best way to look at why we should care about food security is to examine the problems that arise when food security is lacking. That is, when we personally or our community faces food insecurity. Food insecurity is caused by and affects important areas of our lives: our environment, our economy, and our health. Food insecurity has a profound effect on our families, our children, and our communities. Food insecurity causes a great deal of anxiety and can be very stressful for families and children.
I was a single mom in my early 20s and a sole provider for my own family, and there were many times that I was concerned about whether or not I would be able to put a nutritious meal on the table for my son. It made me feel like I was inadequate at times and stressed whether or not I'd be able to feed my child.
It makes you feel sad, because it's like I said, you just can't get what you want for your children, and they're deprived of healthy foods.
It really is very difficult. It really messes your mind up, and you feel like you're the only one, or you feel guilty that you have to ask for help.
My husband and I will both get really stressed out, wondering where all the money's going to come from, and breakdown of communication. And then us being stressed, the kids sense that, and then they act out, and just ends up being a vicious circle until, somehow we get out of it.
We need to work together to make changes that will help families become food secure. Food insecurity affects the community as a whole. For example, desperation from food insecurity can lead to crime, which can make us feel that our communities are not safe. We need to work together to make changes that will ensure that all Canadians have a living wage, safe housing, and adequate nutritious food. Food security requires a healthy environment. Animals and plants must be produced, managed, and harvested in ways that provide for an ongoing and sustainable food system. This includes conserving land to maintain wild foods and conserving the ecosystems that support native plants and animals. To ensure sustainable food systems, we need to make changes that will protect our land, water, and resources.
A lot of our farmlands are being used now and being developed, and that really worries me. So I think about the future and if there'll be enough local food for our own families, for the next generations.
Food insecurity can have a major economic impact on a community. Money spent in a local food system stays in the community longer, and food production provides jobs for local people. money spent on food produced far away does not. We need to work together to make changes that will support local food production and build local economies.
Here in New Brunswick, we're seeing many rural areas being emptied. People are going to the cities. Farmers are becoming extinct in this area. And to have a real food security, we do need those farmers. We do need small, family-owned, sustainable farms.
In the organic farming community, we work together to try to create more value-adding at the farm level or at the primary level of food production, because this returns more profit to the farmers and to the rural communities, and retaining the wealth generated by agriculture in the rural communities is something that's extremely important in creating a more sustainable food system.
Food insecurity, not having enough to eat, and not having good quality, nutritious food, can have short and long-term effects on spiritual, mental, and physical health. For example, poor nutrition leads to chronic illnesses such as heart disease and diabetes.
I'm diabetic, and I know I'm supposed to be eating all from the 4 major food groups. I can't always, because I'm always like out of a month I starve maybe 2 to 5 days because I'm trying to feed my kids 3 square meals a day.
Like where I come from is a lot of people don't eat what they should be eating. I think it's really important to have enough food for the family and not just junk food. Especially on the reservation, we have a really epidemic of diabetes going around.
Food security affects many aspects of our lives every day: our families and children, our communities, the environment, the economy, and our health. But what is being done to make Canada and Canadians more food secure? Section 3. What can we do about food insecurity? The struggle to build food security is not easy, but it is possible. Each of us can play a part. There are 3 kinds of strategies that can be used to address food insecurity: short-term relief strategies, individual or community capacity building strategies, and system change strategies. Short-term relief strategies provide assistance in emergency situations. They include distributing food through food hampers, soup kitchens, children's and school feeding programs, and food banks. Some programs also provide gift certificates or food vouchers to participants. These relief strategies are valuable in providing immediate assistance to those in need of healthy food.
Quand je suis venue ici, elle m'a rencontré ma diététicienne. Je trouve comme j'avais un grand problème.
When I first came here to meet with the dietitian, I found that I had a big problem. But now I'm somewhat relieved because at least I'm getting milk and eggs. These are very important to a pregnant woman, and I'm able to get them. I don't have enough money to buy them, but I am getting them through the emergency food service or milk coupons.
Unfortunately, short-term relief strategies also help to cover up the problem and do not provide long-term solutions. They also fail to address the underlying problems that prevent people from being food secure. Problems such as low wages, lack of education or training opportunities, inadequate childcare, and lack of accessible transportation systems.
Those of us who work with the food insecure, we're starting to realize that for the last decade or two, the programs that were intended to help the hungry and malnourished were not having much impact. So feeding programs and the food bank were operating, but the only thing that was changing is that the numbers were going up.
The Nunavut Food Bank, they tried their best to provide food for families or bachelors, but we do it like bi-weekly due to small fundings.
When you see 3 different generations, let's say the grandmother, the mother, and the daughter, who come to get food baskets, you have the impression that the problem is not being solved.
Going to the food bank, you get to go once a month, and we take our double stroller, and we'd have the kids in the stroller, and we'd push the stroller there, and then the kids would have to walk home because we'd fill up the double stroller with all of our groceries from the food bank. And we get home and we unpack it, and we're like,
there's nothing really here to eat. It's frustrating because you don't know how to use what they give you, and what they give you is not enough to really sustain you for a month. And then what are you supposed to do in the meantime?
Capacity building strategies help to improve food security and the sustainability of the food system by building skills and supporting people to work together for change. These strategies can be used by individuals, organizations, and communities. They promote active and ongoing participation as a way to address health and social problems such as food security. Depending on the local situation, capacity building strategies may include access to land for growing, hunting, and gathering, cooking clubs, collective kitchens, and community gardens. Capacity building strategies are most effective when a long-term approach is taken and when people in the community are involved in identifying solutions. A goal of capacity building is organizing people to change the systems and policies that affect food security. System and policy change are needed to address the underlying causes of food insecurity.
People also need to have this knowledge. You talk about healthy eating, but if people don't have the knowledge or the education, then they won't succeed in becoming truly independent.
I believe that collective kitchens gives the people the opportunity to cook for their families. It's not a handout. They are prepared. They have to come and prepare the meals. They have to take the meals home. It's helping them to be accountable.
The program that we have here is to teach people in our community to be employable. Some of the people didn't even know how to plant a seed or use a shovel even. And by the end of the season, they were driving tractors, building pieces of equipment that we needed for certain crops, and it built their self-esteem, it built their morale. They reassured themselves that they do know how to do stuff.
We have had a basic shelf cooking program for adults in the center, and there was a woman that was in the basic shelf cooking program, and she was a lady in her late 30s with a family. She actually had never been taught how to cook. She didn't know how to prepare meals, and she didn't actually even know how to peel vegetables, and so was very, very pleased with the level of support she had gotten from the program. And it made me realize that we can't assume that families know these skills, and that it's really, really important to teach people these skills.
System change strategies aim to make improvements to policies that will build and support food security and address the root causes of food insecurity. System change strategies are most effective when undertaken by a group or coalition. For example, the project Building Capacity for Food Security Through Mentoring has built the capacity of 11 CAPC and CPNP food security mentors across the country. It has mobilized them to act to build food security through CAPC and CPNP projects.
The purpose of the CAPC CPNP mentoring project is to get people from all across the country involved in a wave of movement to affect change in food security in people's community.
The CAPC CPNP mentoring project started off with our Family Resource Center. First got involved in doing the food costing, which we involved doing community dialogues, working with the Workbook and using those tools.
I think at this point in my community and what we've done here is just to educate the public as to what food security and food insecurity actually is, hoping that once they realize what it is, we can get together and together we can change policy.
We've created a workbook, a toolkit to be able to have people understand what policy is, because many people don't understand that they can influence policy. They always think that it's politicians.
I guess the hopes are to really work on that workbook across the country. It's a great tool that we use to educate people on the importance of food security and how food insecurity really affects everybody in the whole country.
Other examples of system change strategies are developing food policy at school, organization, town, municipal, provincial, or territorial levels, increasing minimum wage, addressing poverty, and using evidence from participatory food costing to increase food allowances in social assistance programs.
A participatory food costing study was conducted in the spring and fall of 2002 in Nova Scotia with funding support from Health Canada. People throughout Nova Scotia involved in family resource centres, some of whom were experiencing food insecurity, participated as researchers and were trained as food costers in their communities. The participatory food costing study served as a springboard to a series of story-sharing workshops to explore the experiences of some of the individuals and families in Nova Scotia most affected by food insecurity, some of whom were interviewed for this video.
We have talked a lot about strategies to improve policy, but what exactly do we mean by the term policy? Section 4. What is policy? A policy is a plan of action agreed to by a group of people with the power to carry it out. It is a framework within which decisions are made. Policies reflect values such as equality and fairness. Every policy has an effect on someone. The good news is that people and groups of people can have an effect on policies. Let's take a look at 3 types of policy: personal, organizational, and public. Personal policy is the set of standards you use to guide your own decisions and actions. For example, as a personal policy, you may decide to buy from a local grocer or producer, or you may buy your food based on the best price.
I've seen change happen on a personal level. It seems that the people who have been involved in the garden have a new outlook on food and food issues. So they're more likely to buy local foods at the farmers market, and obviously they're growing their own food. So they're able to establish a truly local food supply for themselves.
There are some folks here in Saskatoon that have taken an approach that I'm kind of interested in, and some of them are members of CHEP. And they have decided to change their own personal food system. So they have been growing some food, they've been ordering the Good Food Box, they've been purchasing from local farmers. So that's one thing we can do. And we can choose whether we're going to shop at those big box stores or whether we're going to support the smaller local folks. We have that choice.
Organizations such as schools, hospitals, and businesses have policies to guide their daily operations and activities. Policies within organizations may also have many effects within communities. For example, school policy may affect the health of children in a neighborhood or community. Supermarket purchasing policies, such as where they buy their food and from whom, can affect whether or not a farmer can stay in business.
Food isn't just what's on your plate, it comes from somewhere. So we have to be as concerned about the environment that produces the food as well as the environment that consumes that food. And then within that kind of plate, that circle, we have to understand the role of community, of producers, of institutions. In that process, sometimes some get excluded, like multinational food companies, whose in many instances they're interested in a profit on food. And food is, it's essential to life. How can you put a profit on it in a way that turns turns food into something that is a commodity rather than a good?
Public policy occurs at all levels of government, federal, provincial, and municipal. Public policies are developed using input from citizens, government staff, and elected officials. Policies made at the government level have the widest impact. Public policies affect important issues such as minimum wage, housing subsidies, agriculture and farm subsidies, and food safety.
I think there are a number of major fundamental policy questions that impact food security at numerous levels. For me, one of the critical ones is the economic model that we enact through the policies that we have in place now, which basically treat food as a commodity, much like an automobile or a piece of furniture. And if you look at food that way, then it means essentially it goes to people that can afford it or can pay the most for it.
When Health Canada is saying that particular items are essential to our health, and yet we have nothing that protects the prices of these items. There's items in grocery stores that are marked up 200%. And of course, now we have families that can't afford to buy these things. I would like to see some policy development in that region in terms of regulating prices.
From a government point of view, there's been a fair amount of policy processes that have occurred in the mid-90s. 1996, there was Canada-wide consultation that was led by Health Canada at the time that involved a number of sectors and a number of parts of government, different levels of government, NGO, the community, the academic community, and they launched a major document that was an important one that recognized food security as an important strategic direction for the future.
Our federal government has the responsibility to develop healthy public policy to ensure that all Canadians are food secure. Section 5. How can we influence policy? Now that we have a better idea about what policy is, we need to know how we can influence it. There are 4 basic steps to influencing or changing policy. The first step is to find out as much as possible about the policy you want to address. In order to influence policy, you need to be clear about your issues, your goals, and which individuals or organizations will support or challenge your ideas. You need to know what type of impacts the policy is having, how broad the impacts are, how long it has been going on, and what will happen if the policy is not addressed.
We found that out of 11 municipalities, 5 don't have real grocery stores. They have convenience stores. As a result, access to fresh fruits and vegetables is a real problem for several families.
We don't have transportation in Pictou County anymore, so people can't access going to a lot of different services that we have in Pictou County, example the food bank or the grocery store. So we're looking into how to approach and how to get public transportation back in Pictou County. So the Community Health Board has made that as one of their priorities, and we're working together with them on how to do that. And we're also working together with United Way as one of our partners to work on that issue as well.
Step 2 is to find partners and allies. You need to identify and engage stakeholders and develop networks or connections between different people and different groups. Stakeholders are people who are interested in or affected by an issue and who want to be involved in looking for solutions. Possible partners and allies include other families, neighbors, parents, citizens, volunteer and nonprofit organizations, business and industry, academics, media, and government.
We have some pretty solid partners, and I think the fact that we have government involved has particularly helped us a great deal to access some of the facility and some of the resources we need to do the work that we do.
Our network was represented as part of a coalition of other community groups here in St. John's who requested a meeting with government to lobby against their proposed clawback of the National Child Benefit from income support recipients here in the province. And by having that collective voice, they were able to help get that decision reversed. And as a result, this province was one of the few at that time who didn't claw back the National Child Benefit, which really did make a difference then to people on income support.
Local media has been really, really important to the success of our Fruit Tree project in particular. A local reporter heard about the story and did a front page story, and it really generated a lot of interest. I don't think we could have started the way we did without that help.
Step 3 is learning about the policy process. As well as knowing what you want to do and having partners to help you reach your goal, you need to know the policy process, policy tools, and public policy makers. If the policy requires government involvement, you'll need to know which level of government to approach and which specific people are responsible for developing policy on your issue. Once you know this, you know who has the power to address the policy you're interested in changing.
We did our homework ourselves. Before calling on government, before calling on other stakeholders, we called on our own groups.
Through the workbook, it gives us some tools to meet with the politician,
I realized that before I was meeting the politician, I have very easy access to them, but I was not prepared. I had not done my homework. So now by taking the book, I really prepare what I'm going to talk to them, and I'm going to go with facts. So when they come with a story, I have another story to tell them.
We need to take very practical action, and I think that the development of workbooks such as the Thought About Food is an extremely important resource, because it does give to the communities practical know-how as to how we actually could address food security at that level, but also how it's possible to influence policies in your own communities, but very, very practical. And that's important to have those type of tools that enable action, practical actions.
The fourth step is to take action. When you know what you want to do, have partners to help, and know who has the power to change the policy you're concerned with, it's time to act. Remember that we can be policymakers too. We can create personal or organizational food policies without involving any level of government. With organization, determination, and an action plan, the possibilities for change are greatly improved, and every action helps food security grow. Section 6. Strategies for action. There are many ways to take action on the issue of food security, and there are many examples of how people have begun to influence policy to build food security.
I think the philosophy we've had at Parents' Place is that we can do small things, and if everyone does a small thing in their organization, it can make a difference.
The Reach in the Regina Food Security Project has been advocating on behalf of hungry and malnourished people for a number of years, and I think that's the main role we play to affect policy. It's incumbent upon us to help others understand how food insecurity affects their community.
The steps that we have, well, it's still in the process, is the food equity, which is trying to get all the other territories and provinces to level up to their prices in the stores. That's in the process right now.
We conducted studies on the cost of renting, on the cost of food, the minimum that would be considered nutritiously adequate. These studies and briefs allowed us to work together with a number of major jurisdictions, such as the City of Montreal or other levels of government, to try to change these policies.
At the policy level, we're involved with just an exceptional network across Alberta called the Alberta Social and Health Equity Network. We had this incredible conference in Calgary that was called Reality Check 2005, and from that conference we have a document that we've put together, and we're looking at coming up with some recommendations and hopefully form some kind of a charter, a social charter for our province that says this is what the people of Alberta require to live well.
What I can do, I guess, in terms of changing food policy and developing policy is to make my own operation viable. And I think if I can show the consumer and also the other small-scale producer out there that there are some alternatives, my working model of an alternative can contribute a great deal to the development of food policy because it shows something that is viable.
There is a separation between the producer and the consumer, and it is necessary to fill in this gap so that people are able to regain their power. And this has brought us to work for 3 years with all our groups in many committees to establish a national policy on food security that calls for different stakeholders who are concerned with food.
I think we've done a good job over the past few years in trying to link with other groups and to strengthen our own membership. And one of the things that we're doing right now is that we've applied for funding from the Population Health Fund of the Public Health Agency of Canada for a project called Food Security, It's Everybody's Business. and it's a community mobilization project that will run from, well, it started last September in 2005 and will run till March of 2008. And what we're trying to do is bring people together to talk about what they see as the issues, what they're currently doing around food security, and what kinds of things we need to work toward in terms of policy change in the province.
A good place to start is simply getting people talking about the issue. You can increase public awareness by starting a dialogue through conversations in your community. You can also form a food policy group by bringing together a wide range of individuals and organizations with complementary interests and skills to focus on influencing policy. Building good working relationships with stakeholders and others is essential for any strategy you use. In order to be effective in building awareness and taking action, you'll need to develop cooperative, constructive relationships with many different people. These can include politicians, public servants, people in your community, media, policymakers, experts and researchers, health professionals, and people in other organizations. This video and the Thought About Food Workbook are valuable tools full of ideas and strategies for action on food security. Food security is important to everyone because it has an impact on our families, our children, our environment, our economy, our communities, and our health.
The future of food security in Canada remains to be seen. I am worried more and more about the erosion of controls that protect local farmers, that protect local markets.
I hope the future is bright for food security in Canada. We're at a point today where there's more and more recognition that things have to change. Our current food system is driven by fossil fuels. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about the production of chemical fertilizer or the movement of food around the world. It depends and is driven by fossil fuels.
I am a little worried about our future. I think if people do not stand up and vote, if they do not stand up and say, okay, wait a minute, we're so resource rich in Canada, there's really no need for anybody to be homeless in Canada. We have the resources in Canada. It's how they're being expended.
We need to work as individuals, as organizations, as communities, and different levels of government have to join forces in addressing this very significant problem, but also one that requires a shared approach and a shared solution.
I'm quite optimistic that the future of food security in Canada is good. We have a great agricultural base. We have the resources, and I think you're finding across Canada more and more governments and others are getting actively involved in food security.
I think if everyone put their heads together in one room, I believe we would resolve some of the problems we have right now.
This is a huge issue, probably one of the largest issues affecting Canadian families, and it's something that we can very definitely do something about.
Canada has so much to offer, yet food insecurity continues to exist in this country. Building food security for all Canadians is not easy, but it is possible if we work together for policy change. The decisions we make and the actions we take every day have a profound effect on our lives, on our communities, and on all of Canada. Personal, organizational, and public policies all affect food security. They affect families and children, the health of Canadians, the Canadian environment, and the sustainability of the Canadian food system. When we become aware of food insecurity and learn about its root causes and the policies that influence it, we can begin to plan actions to improve food security. The Thought About Food Workbook and this video are resources that can help. We can all take steps toward building long-term solutions for food security through policy change. Solutions that improve self-sufficiency and choice. Solutions that increase our production of and access to locally grown food. solutions that ensure all Canadians have safe, healthy food, and solutions that provide healthy choices for all of us. Governments at all levels have a key role to play by working with citizens to develop policy that ensures that every Canadian has nutritious, safe, personally acceptable, and culturally appropriate foods that are produced and distributed in ways that are environmentally sound and socially just. Even one small change to your personal or organizational policy is a step in the right direction. All Canadians should have healthy food. It is a human right. Food security is everyone's business.
We're next to drink the water. We're next to breathe the air. We're next to put out the fires. So show us that you care. We're next to replant the forests. We're next to replenish the land. We'll grow the crops to feed the hungry. Please show us that you understand. Our generation wants to be happy and free, to live in a world where life's the way it's supposed to be. We're next to grow up. We're next to grow up. We're next to grow up, and we're counting on you. We're next to take care of the planet, so all the animals can survive. We're next to save the rainforests, so all the critters can thrive. We're next to clean the pollution from the rivers, the oceans, and the air. We need some good solutions. We're next to grow up. We're next to grow up, and we're counting on you.